It is night. Ancient Rome sleeps. Deep beneath the city, amid damp catacombs, the dim light of an oil lamp illuminates only fragments of stone walls. The air is heavy, damp, and musty. A woman stands by an old well. In her hands she holds a lead tablet, a lock of hair, and a piece of cloth stained with blood. She quickly folds the tablet, drives a rusty nail into it, and with a trembling breath throws it into the black depths. The metallic sound echoes for a moment and disappears, as if swallowed by the darkness itself. Now pause for a moment. This is not a scene from a horror movie. This is part of everyday life in ancient Rome. Before you is a defixio, a curse. Lead tablets with inscriptions were hidden in graves, wells, or shrines to bind a person to someone else's will. Love in Rome often began not with kisses, but with graves and curses. Defixiones. The word itself comes from the Latin defigere, meaning to attach. But the Romans did not mean simply attaching iron to wood. They believed that words written on a lead tablet could nail the victim's soul, depriving them of sleep, peace, and freedom. These tablets were thin, almost like foil. They were often pierced with rusty nails, as if each blow was meant to nail the person to the curse. And they were always hidden in the darkest places, in tombs, in wells, under the temples of the gods of the underworld. Where the line between the living and the dead was the thinnest. Now imagine, an archaeologist unfolds a tablet that is 2,000 years old and sees lines that sound terrifying even today. Let him know no sleep. Let her heart burn with desire. Let his legs refuse to serve him. Simple, almost mundane formulas, but the Romans believed that they worked without fail. And they were not written in ink. Sometimes they were written with blood or other bodily fluids. Because only then, according to the Romans, did the words become alive. The ritual always took place at night, when the neighbors were asleep and the underground gods, as they believed, could hear more clearly. Now imagine another scene. Imagine a man quietly lowering a lead tablet into a well. Next to it is a wax figure with a pierced heart. He is convinced that every needle piercing the dull pierces the body of his enemy. It was a kind of ancient analogue of voodoo. But there were even more terrifying rituals. To strengthen the power of the curse, they used soil or bones from the graves of those who had died an unjust death, children, criminals, gladiators. It was believed that restless souls willingly serve the living. This meant that every curse was also an act of desecration of the grave. Defixio was not just a note. It was a sentence directed at both the body and the soul. Sometimes literally, words nailed to lead were supposed to nail the person against whom they were written. In Rome, it was believed that evil could not only be sent into the world through curses, but also reflected back with the help of amulets. The most famous of these was the fascinum. These were small phallic pendants made of bronze, bone, or glass. They were worn by children and warriors, hung above the doors of houses, placed in public squares, and even attached to military flags. Imagine a Roman legionnaire. A tiny phallic amulet glitters on his helmet. He believes that this symbol will protect him from the evil eye and evil spirits more powerfully than a bronze shield. But amulets were not limited to symbols. The body was also used. Hair, nails, pieces of clothing, all of these were considered powerful keys to a person. It was believed that by obtaining a piece of the body, one could influence its owner. There are also references to bodily fluids. Ancient recipes include milk, drops of blood, and even semen. For some, it was protection, for others, a way to bind a loved one forever. Now imagine a different picture. A slave girl secretly picks up a hair from her master's comb. She knows that if she is caught, it will mean certain death. For the masters, it is simply magic. For slaves, it is a risk to their lives. Archaeology confirms these stories. Some lead tablets with curses were found with human hair inside. And in children's graves, archaeologists have found amulets, small protective pendants that were supposed to protect against evil forces even after death. And one more detail. Some rituals required the performer to be in a special state. The words had to be spoken with maximum purity, as if opening oneself to the gods. This emphasized the main idea of the Romans: the body itself was an instrument of magic. But not all magic in Rome was dark. There were also amulets designed solely for protection. Mothers hung bulla amulets around their children's necks, small round capsules made of metal or leather, inside which protective spells or symbols were hidden. They contained animal teeth, pieces of amber, or even just words of prayer. Bullae were considered so important that boys wore them until they came of age, and girls until they got married. It was a kind of shield against the evil eye and evil spirits. Even in temples, you could see small tablets with requests to the gods for the health of children or protection of the home. In such cases, magic was not frightening, it gave hope. And that is why the contrast with love spells, curses, and sacrifices seems even more frightening. Because next to an amulet that was supposed to save a child's life, there could be a lead tablet with a curse wishing death upon a neighbor or slave. All this shows that in Rome, the body was not just flesh. It was transformed into material for spells, talismans, and magical manipulations. When amulets were not enough, the Romans resorted to potions and drinks. Love magic could look like an ordinary glass of wine, but this wine was not ordinary at all. Ancient texts describe recipes that sound like pure poison today. Imagine a cup of wine mixed with copper or lead. Mercury infusions. Herbal decoctions where the difference between awakening desire and causing death was just one extra drop. There were also milder ingredients: rue, myrtle, pomegranate, parsley. They were believed to be able to ignite passion or, conversely, extinguish it. But the most trusted drinks were those to which something personal was added, a sign that the magic would affect the person who drank it. Now imagine a Roman matron. She leans over a glass of wine, and a slave quietly adds something invisible to it. For her husband, it's just dinner. For her, it's a desperate attempt to tie him to her forever. Pliny the Elder wrote that women could even mix menstrual blood into food. To us, this sounds like a terrible myth. But there are references to this in Roman sources. And this shows how deeply people believed in the magic of the body. Apuleius, in The Golden Ass, describes dangerous love potions that brought more fear than hope. And Pliny, in Natural History, gives dozens of recipes, some promised passion, others brought death. But the most frightening thing is who prepared these potions. Most often, it was female slaves. And if the potion did not work as intended, if instead of love it brought illness or death, it was not those who ordered it who were blamed, but those who carried it out. Imagine a slave girl holding a clay pot in her hands. She knows that if her master feels ill, tomorrow her body could end up at the slave market, or on the scaffold. Love magic in Rome could turn into a death sentence at any moment. In Rome, it was believed that the body had to be open for magic to work. Therefore, nudity was a key element in many rituals. It was not an intimate gesture, but a public act that gave the spell its power. A woman stands before a statue of Venus. Torches cast shadows on the stone, and several witnesses watch in silence. She is naked, not for beauty, but to prove her submission to the goddess. Her body becomes a sacrifice, and her shame becomes proof of her devotion. Sometimes slaves took the place of matrons. Their bodies were substitutes, symbolic sacrifices offered to the gods. For the mistress, it was a magical ritual. For the slave, it was humiliation from which there was no escape. Such rituals always had a taste of dehumanization. Publicity, demonstration of defenselessness, submission to the crowd and the gods, all this was considered a necessary condition for the spell to break through any protection. Some magical texts demanded even more. The words of the spell had to be spoken completely naked. It was believed that only then would the voice become pure and the body a conduit for power. What could be more humiliating for a person than to lose the right to their own body and turn it into an instrument of magic? In a world where honor and the body were inextricably linked, the body itself became the key to the success of a spell. In Roman beliefs, the body gradually ceased to be just a symbol. There came a moment when it itself became a sacrifice. Blood was considered the most valuable. After gladiatorial battles, the crowd rushed into the arena, trying to get at least a drop of the defeated still warm blood. Pliny the Elder wrote that it was drunk to cure epilepsy or gain strength. The scene comes to mind: screams, the hot sand of the arena, outstretched hands. The death of a warrior becomes a medicine and a magical remedy. Stop for a moment and think. What does this say about a society that saw human blood not as a tragedy, but as a chance to grab a piece of power? Some sources mention even more horrific practices: the use of baby ashes in love spells. Historians argue about how widespread this was. But the very existence of such stories shows how far the imagination of the Romans could go in their search for magical power. Animal sacrifices were also common. Goats, dogs, pigeons, their lives were given up for magical success. And most often, in matters of love. At this stage, magic was no longer satisfied with amulets or herbs. Bodily fluids, milk, blood, semen, became the main currency of the ritual. The line between love and death became so blurred that it disappeared altogether. And this raises a question for us: which is stronger, the thirst for love or the fear of death? In Roman magic, they always went hand in hand. Every spell, every drop of blood proved that love in Rome demanded sacrifice. The Roman state viewed magic with suspicion. Love spells may have seemed like a private matter, but in a world where honor and power were fragile, every spell was perceived as a threat. Laws against maleficium, harmful magic, were in place even during the Republic. But it was during the Empire that persecution became particularly harsh. Anyone suspected of making potions or writing curses risked being brought to trial. The following scene comes to mind: a matron in expensive clothes stands in the courtroom. She denies her guilt, but the judges have already made their decision: her property will be confiscated and her name will be tarnished. At the same moment, slaves found with tablets or potions are led away. There are no investigations or lawyers for them. Only execution awaits them. One of the most famous cases was that of the writer Apuleius, author of The Golden Ass. He was accused of using love magic against a rich widow whom he had married. His opponents claimed that he had bewitched her for her fortune. At his trial, Apuleius delivered a speech called Apologia, in which he defended himself, explaining that his knowledge of medicine and philosophy had been mistaken for magic. This shows how dangerous any mention of witchcraft was. Even an educated person risked being brought to trial because of gossip. The chronicles have preserved dozens of such stories. Sometimes the verdicts seem absurd. In the late Roman world, strange, hybrid defixiones were even found, lead tablets with the word Christ written next to the names of underground gods. This was a manifestation of despair. People tried to use any power to get what they wanted, even mixing magic and a new religion. Stop and think. What made people take such risks? The reason is simple: the Romans were afraid of losing control over their bodies. For men, this meant strength and lust; for women, the ability to bear children. Magic was perceived as an intrusion into the very essence of life. And here we encounter a paradox. Those who condemned magic the most often used it themselves. There are references to even empresses resorting to magic, risking everything but unwilling to lose power or love. Isn't that ironic? The majestic Roman laws prohibited magic, but even at the highest levels of power, no one could resist it. Magic in Rome was not a pastime for loners. It permeated all strata of society. Imagine a street in the Subura district. The ghostly light of torches, the noise of a tavern, laughter and shouts. A simple prostitute offers her client not only a glass of cheap wine, but also a small bottle of passion potion. For some, it is as commonplace as buying an amulet at the market. Now let's move to the home of a wealthy matron. Her husband holds a high position, and political alliances are held together by family marriages. For her, love spells are not just a whim. They are a weapon. A spell can keep her husband at home or prevent her lover from leaving her. Here, magic becomes an extension of political struggle. There were also curses that had a purely political meaning. Imagine a thin lead plate with the words, "May he forget his words in court," engraved on it. This plate was thrown into a well along with a strand of the victim's hair. An insignificant gesture, but behind it could lie the fate of an entire career or even a state affair. Slaves were the ones who carried out these rituals. They secretly collected materials, hair, scraps of fabric, half-empty glasses. They wrote the words and hid the plates. But they were the ones who risked the most. Their mistress could escape punishment, but a slave always became a convenient scapegoat. Rumors circulated even among the highest echelons of society. Empresses and aristocratic women were often accused of using magic. After all, who else but they had access to the most dangerous means of maintaining love or power? The gossip even reached the imperial court. Empress Sabina, wife of Hadrian, was suspected by her contemporaries of resorting to magic to keep her husband's affection. Later, there were rumors about Julia Domna, wife of Septimius Severus, who was interested in astrology and magical practices. These stories are not always confirmed by facts, but their very existence speaks for itself. Magic was so widespread in the minds of the Romans that even the first women of the empire were not immune to it. Stop and think. What could make a woman risk everything, even her own honor? Some dared to mix drops of their menstrual blood into the food or wine of men. Pliny the Elder wrote about this as a means of binding a lover forever. It sounds creepy to us, but the Romans sincerely believed in the power of such a ritual. All of this together shows one thing: from the taverns of Subura to the palaces on the Palatine Hill, magic was everywhere. It lived in the shadow of the great Rome and did not let go of either the poor or the rich. If you follow this story from beginning to end, it looks like a real descent into darkness. At first, everything seems innocent. Amulets against the evil eye are small pendants worn by children or warriors. Ordinary symbols that seem to pose no threat. But stop and look closer. The next step is herbs, infusions, and potions. Then the body is used: hair, blood, fragments of life. And finally, magic crosses the line: sacrifices, gladiator blood, ashes, which ancient authors called the strongest ingredient. Can you feel the mood changing? Here, love and death merge into one. From amulets to humiliation. From secret curses to trials and executions. In Roman culture, the body became everything at once: a sacrifice, a weapon, and currency. In later centuries, another legend arose that lived in people's imaginations: ius primi noctis, supposedly the right of the first night, when a ruler had the right to the bride of his subordinate. Most historians believe this to be a myth. The very emergence of such an idea speaks volumes. The female body was seen as a symbol of defenselessness and complete dependence on authority. All this together creates the feeling that we are step by step descending into the underworld. Each level is darker than the previous one. And each one is closer to death. In ancient Rome, the body was more than just flesh. It became a sacrifice, a weapon, and a currency. It was used to curse, defend, bind, and punish. Body parts, bodily fluids, even humiliation, everything could be used for magic. Sexual magic combined love, fear, power, and death into one knot. For the Romans, it was part of everyday life. For us, it is almost unimaginable horror. Think about it. We went from simple amulets to potions, from potions to sacrifices, and finally to blood and death. We have seen how even a new religion was mixed with witchcraft, and legends such as ius primi noctis only emphasize the complete defenselessness of the body before power. For the Romans, the body was not just their own. It became a means of influencing others, a bargaining chip with the gods, a currency in a world where everything had a price. But think about it, are we really that far from the Romans? They threw curses into wells, we throw coins into fountains. They wore amulets, we wear lucky pendants or bracelets. They believed in love spells, and today entire websites make money from this. So perhaps only the form has changed. The human need to influence love and fate has remained the same. And maybe that's why this magic seems so scary to us. Because it reminds us that love could have started not with a kiss, but with a grave and a lead curse. And the price has always been the same, the body as a sacrifice.